We would like to continue with the panel discussion on the European Civil Society Strategy proposal. And we have 4 panelists. 2 you have already met, Anna and Giada. And we have 2 other women from Central Europe, Simona Constantinescu from the Civil Society Development Foundation in Romania, and Divjak from CNVOS Slovenia. I always forget the full, very long name of the organization. And so what I wanted to talk to you about is that we heard that there are several initiatives underway in the European Union which has a relevance to civil society. We heard about the SURF program, the rule of law report, the initiative for an European Association statutes and minimum standards. We heard about the story and the results of the conference on the future of Europe. So my first question to you would be that, in your view, are these enough to make Europe a better place for civil society? Is there anything, is there any other work happening on the European level that you're aware of and we have not talked about? So the first question is that, is this enough, or is there anything else still going on? I don't know who feels like starting. Okay. Simona? Oh, grab a mic.
Does it work? Yeah. Hello, everyone. Nice being here. I work with an organization who has the privilege to serve a wide range of organizations, from small NGOs to rather experienced or well-established organization, but also we have the privilege to remain connected, let's say, regionally throughout the projects we have, and with a steady network of partners, but also somehow we try to be connected at the European level and have and be in contact also with international donors, with institutional donors, with Brussels-based platform, at the entire range of stakeholders. But my perspective today will be from my role of head of advocacy in a national-based organization in Romania. I think apart from the initiatives and programs mentioned earlier, which are happening at the level of European Union, there are other things happening in Europe, not necessarily under the umbrella of European Union, but in Europe. And these are somehow connected with what is happening in Ukraine. They were determined by the Ukraine war. And now I am referring to the USAID coming back in the region. As you know, USAID and American funds somehow withdrawn after each of us joined EU, because they consider that we are okay and they need to draw their attention somewhere else, and they are back. I don't know if this is good or bad. In a way, it's bad because they felt like they should come back, so we are in trouble. On the other hand, they might, let's say, accelerate a bit things at the level of the European Union, because based on my experience, I work in the NGO sector since the 90s. The approach the Americans had in the region was pretty much more oriented to strategy and mission and values, and less on project-based. I think European Union approach and programs are rather structured on project-based, and this is a loss for the civil society. And maybe the presence of USAID in the region might change a bit this approach. Also, international UN organizations or international aid organizations stepping in, at least in bordering to Ukraine countries, with assistance programs, also might influence a bit the landscape of the civil society in the region, particularly in the region Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe. I'm not sure that the influx of funds from this line will increase our capacity. Right now we are feeling like there is a small competition, let's say, at least at the level of Romania, between the UN agency and the locally based organization, which jumped in immediately to assist and to do stuff when the war in Ukraine started. But probably it's up to us to somehow use this opportunity or turn it into an opportunity and make sure that they are aware that this is a space a bit different from the countries they are usually working in, because all of us are countries members of the European Union with more or less but functional structure and infrastructure, both at civil society sector and also public institutions level.
Giada?
Yes, to respond to your question, it's true we have a few initiatives now that mention civil society and that are mentioned also by the Commission when we say, well, civil society is under pressure. We ask for action and they respond, well, we have the rule of law, we have the SERV and so on. What we see is, though, that there is not a proper understanding of what is the role that civil society plays at the European level and in Europe, and how crucial it is to support civil society, not only because it implements cheap project on the ground, not only because it protects rule of law, but also because it shapes the Europe we want and can help shape policies, can help monitor these policies and oversee what governments do with these policies. So there is bits and pieces here and there, and keywords, civil society in all these different pieces, but there is not even a definition of what civil society is at the European level. And we see that often this means that EU law, even though the EU says that there is no mandate to do law, to do a strategy on civil society, actually the EU is already regulating widely civil society, but not properly, because it's not mentioned, it's captured by different lenses, be it enterprise, be it political advertisement, be it something else. So the EU has also contributed to distort, to some extent, the nature of civil society sometimes, or EU policies have been over-implemented by governments to shrink civic space, or sometimes the shrinking of civic space has impact on EU policies, and here it's an opportunity for the EU also to protect the civil society, also to protect its objectives. So yes, I think that we need something putting all these pieces together, but also adding some political recognition, some understanding of how the civil society can be a partner of of Europe, and what in return Europe can do for civil society.
So now, like from different perspective, so I would say that civil society is the first one to react when there is a catastrophe or something like back happening. Like now, as I said before, the civil society organizations were the first one to react when it comes to pandemic and vulnerable groups that were left behind by the state. and the first one to support the refugees. But at the same time, they are the first one to be under attack when there is, for example, they are against the government and they are on their dark list, blacklist to for example, get them out of the grants, and as well as the first one to accuse of supporting asylum seekers trying to cross the Polish-Belarusian border, and also the first one to be replaced by gongos when it comes to representation on the high European level. I'm speaking now about the Polish representation to the European Social Committee, European Economic Social Committee, and the first one to also receive the huge amount of money from the Polish state to also to disseminate the pro-governmental agenda. And actually, with such a support, it's really hard to compete. So actually, that's to the list of challenges that was raised here, the challenges that were listed. I would add also this challenges and also threats, and at the same time they are that's I would say the essential part of the society that it's still giving the hope for many vulnerable groups, and also topics that are not currently the mainstream, because when it comes to the big business and their CSR, we can all discuss about our experience, but from my observation, they are only interested in what is trendy at the moment. So actually, we have to also, as civil society in each country, have to also compete with them. So not only UN agency, not only the illiberal democracies government, but also with the big business that decides what is the target of the their civic engagement. So thank you.
Tina?
Yeah, I would maybe, since I'm the last one and I don't want to repeat things, but I think that we also need to change our perspective, because we all the time we say the civil society is in trouble, we are being attacked, we need support, we need money, but we actually haven't actually discussed the EU understanding of civil society. There are so many initiatives, and I started to work in the sector way back with the Romano Prodi's Commission, and there was this white book on the cooperation, and there was, optimism and the enlargement, and everything was like shiny, and development. But very soon after that, the populism started its march across Europe, and we see now that very slowly the Commission actually is starting to react, but it's like really small steps, as Giada said, bits and pieces. But we cannot neglect the fact that the EU doesn't really know how to use civil society in a way that would actually know how civil society can contribute to the understanding of values and purpose of the EU by citizens. How to use civil society in the fight against populism and polarization. And this is what I miss, and that's why from this point of view, then we see the SURF program, for example, that is being fragmented, that is really complicated. There is no vision of how to actually work and use the civil society. And here I think that the strategy, for example, as an opportunity to think this through, is a very good mechanism that comes like at the right time, even though it's maybe 5 years too late, but you can do what you can do.
We started talking about that like 5 years ago. Yeah, but before we go into that, you mentioned, or we talked about that there are quite a few things going on currently, and these are mostly, let's say, in the making. So let's say that all these procedures or processes will come to a successful end. So we will have a new directive on the minimum standards of freedom of assembly. We will have a better regulations or rules for dialogue. We will have the SERV program more adapted to the needs of civil society. So what do you think, what will it mean for European civil society? Do you think it would really help CSOs, especially in countries where they are under pressure? Do you think it would create a better situation for these organizations in these countries? Simona again. Go ahead.
I would expect that European Union institution would use better the collective wisdom it has, because okay, it is a partnership or a union of different states, and some of them might have a liberal tendency, while the others may anticipate and react. So somehow the collective wisdom gathered there, the level of institution, should be used for making the most for the entire European Union at large, but also for each individual state member. So I would expect that if all those things would happen, having minimum standards, having great funding, grant making or funding, no matter if there are grants or different programs, I would expect that the European Union would start to better know its customer. You know that in the jargon of the anti-money laundering legislation, there is an obligation to know your customer. And that created a lot of fuss and discussion in defining the ultimate beneficial owner, and the legislation as such, coming from the European level as a directive, needed to be transposed and raised a lot of complications at the level of national states. And at least for me, it was like an alarm signal, because then I realized that those lawmakers at the Brussels level didn't know their customer, didn't know what language or professional language to use in such a way to fit each national jurisdictions and not create additional problems, not programs. So I would expect that to happen if all these things may be in place. Minimum standards, I'm really fan of minimum standards, provided that before, either through consultation or, I don't know, investing in professionals at the level of the institution themselves, because if I would be a golden fish, or if I would have the golden fish in front of me, and I would have the possibility to imagine the perfect public servant at the level of the European Union, I would imagine that that person dealing with matters related to civil society would have been before working within civil society organization, at least at the level of project management. So that person would know and would imagine the red tape and the bureaucracy attached to spending European money before drawing a grant-making program. And maybe I would encourage also the staff of the European institution somehow to have internships in NGOs to better understand their customers before drawing policies and documents addressing this category of stakeholders. Apart from the consultation mechanism, who we all want to be, would like to be more effective and more effective. I hate the word efficiency.
Yes, I think that there is a need really for the EU to understand what civil society is, train its civil servants to approach civil society, but also remember that civil society is protected by human rights international standards. So it's not that the EU needs to start from scratch. There is a wide pool of knowledge and expertise and standards of protection that needs to refer to. And this is what also sometimes the EU forgets when making laws that also affect the civil society. In terms of how these could be useful at the national level, I think that once there is a political acknowledgement of the role that civil society plays and how the EU can use this role, I hope that this would also be a leverage to use its EU mandate every time that at least every time that the challenges interconnect with some EU competence, which can be phrased or interpreted in a very broad matter, because we often see some kind of overlaps, like if environmental organization is targeted by the government, this potentially is a threat for the EU Green Deal. So the EU should intervene. So also what we are asking is inside each DG of the Commission and inside each institution, there should be someone in charge of being in contact with the civil society, not only to receive the input of the civil society, but also to be ready to intervene in case there is an attack on some organization working on this, on the field of action. There is also a need to, I think, learn inside of the EU from what they have outside in the external policies and also in the neighborhood. Yes, even just to exchange and to learn from the different DGs, because it's not that everything is to throw away and rebuild. There is already a lot of knowledge that can be better spread inside the institutions.
Referring to what Tina said, that European Union does not use civil society properly, sorry for this word, I would say that also sometimes civil society also doesn't know and doesn't use European Union properly. So it should, go both way. I can speak for Poland and Polish organizations, that civil society organizations, that when there was this, I would say, this experience with the representation to the ESC, so many organizations didn't know what actually happened in Poland, that actually there was some like people from pro-governmental organizations trying to kidnapped actually the whole Polish representation to this committee, and so actually I would go both ways. So actually to spread also awareness inside civil societies in our countries, how to properly use the European Union programs, how to properly use. I know that is extra knowledge to be learned. That is extra capacity needed for that, and we all know how much time does it take to fulfill all the surveys, to take part all the researchers and write reports and contribute to all the rule of law reports, and actually that's all like full-time job or lifetime even job for us. So I don't want to add more to civil society, but I just want to say that it's also work to be done inside our communities, also inside our grassroots organizations that haven't been there and haven't been so far invited, or also like with this effort to make them like be more with the whole capacity building programs built for them. So I would maybe add this perspective, not to just judge European Union of not being aware of the civil society, but for sure I signed what's said by Simona. I would love to that people actually very kind people that I met from the SURF program working for them. I wish that also they had this experience of applying as a civil society organizations, and maybe this perspective also is spreading as well for the civil society to know how to work for the programs and knowing all the procedures and administrative regulations that should be fulfilled. Thank you.
I think that this is working. Yeah? Oh, no, it's not. Okay, so drawing from our recent experience of the 2 years that just passed, thank God, is that the immediate actually positive consequences of the let's say passing of such a strategy, we see it in the EU acknowledging or taking NGOs seriously, because what we saw is that the focus was on media freedom. In the rule of law, we talked about this in the morning. Civic space NGOs are just like a little bit by the way mentioned. Also the LIBE monitoring, everything that happened, the spotlight on Slovenia was focused on media. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that media freedom is not important. I'm just saying that civic space or the normal functioning of NGOs is equally important. But the EU now, it's not treating this on the same level. So with this kind of strategy, I kind of hope that that the NGOs would be on the same level. And then the question about what will this mean to the member states, especially those more challenging ones, is that what we saw. But you need to understand that before Janša, we lived in a kind of normal democracy, and it came as a shock. And what we draw, the experience was from Romania. Our question was, how did you get rid of your right-wing government? And they said international pressure. So that's why what we did is like engage in serious discussions with the EU institutions, the Council of Europe, FRA, to let them know, so that Slovenia was mentioned time and time again by the EU institutions, and the media that were not taken over by Janša reported on this tremendously and really actively. So the pressure and all of the reports and the recommendations and the EU uses, or the EA grants for that matter, we issue our concern about the situation in Slovenia. So these concerns were then mentioned in the media, and people were ashamed. Were like, we don't want to live in a country that is on the agenda of the European Parliament. And this was a very important stone in the results of our elections. So in the light of what Daniel Hegedus said yesterday, we see this, these countries are like a pressure cooker, and you just add pressure until the pressure cooker, meaning authoritarian government, explodes. But this is for the countries where you can still do something. While there are some countries that need a little bit still more additional support and pressures, and this is something that we also need to talk about, that because the ordinary EU mechanisms can work for countries like Slovenia, for example, or for the preventive sake in Italy, France, Estonia maybe, but Hungary and Poland need a bit additional support, I would say.
Giada, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, sorry, my face was... yes, and this is also why I was thinking in terms of the EU should act also in their respective competencies. Like, we left Hungary, Hungarian civil society basically without access to EU funding. Why was there no action from the Commission in terms of ensuring, like before, now that we have the SERV, but even before that, why didn't the Commission do something to ensure that the access to EU funding was not politicized? Or why did we need to wait, I don't know how many years for the Court of Justice ruling on the NGO law, and then more time to put pressure on the government to make sure that this is implemented, and now to make sure that the new law is respectful, which is not, of the resolution. So my hope, so I don't think that a civil society strategy is magic, but what I would hope is to have some more political leverage to make use of the tools that exist, because they do exist. They also need to be used with some strength by the institution.